Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Watch my video and subscribe my channel. Ridge Forrester had always been the epicenter of passion, loyalty, betrayal, and heartbreak in Los Angeles. But no one expected the storm that erupted when his 5 shocking words shattered everything Taylor Hayes had been holding on to for years, and the ripple effect would change the entire Forrester family dynamic forever, leaving Taylor in tears, her heart crushed, and the entire fashion house buzzing with speculation, whispers, and the deafening echoes of a love that could never fully heal. It all began on a rainy afternoon at the Forrester mansion, when Ridge returned from a trip overseas where he had spent weeks reflecting on his tangled past with Brooke Logan, the enduring mother of his children, and Taylor Hayes, the brilliant psychiatrist who had stood by him through tragedy, deception, and countless family wars, hoping he would finally choose her without hesitation. Without the lingering ghost of Brooke haunting every kiss, every promise, every plan for their future. But when Ridge entered the living room and saw Taylor waiting there, hope glimmering in her eyes like a fragile candle in a storm, he knew he could no longer pretend, no longer drag her through the cycles of uncertainty. And that was when he uttered those 5 devastating words. "I can't do this anymore." A sentence so simple yet so loaded with history, pain, and finality that Taylor felt the ground beneath her tremble as though her entire world was collapsing. And for a woman who had stitched up broken minds for a living, who had healed countless others, she found herself utterly incapable of mending the gaping wound those words tore through her soul, because for months, even years, she had believed Ridge's renewed commitment to her was real, that their rekindled love, solidified after his betrayals and their children's pleas for family unity, would stand strong against Brooke's constant pull. But deep down, a part of Taylor had always feared that no matter how much time passed, Brooke's shadow lingered in every room they shared, in every whispered memory of Italy, Aspen, or those fateful moments when Ridge would find Brooke in distress and become her savior all over again. And now here she was, her hands trembling as she clutched the back of the sofa for support, tears streaming down her cheeks, demanding answers that her heart already knew yet could not accept, asking him if this was about Brooke, if this was about destiny, if it was about the kiss she heard whispers of during the fashion summit in Rome. And Ridge, with that signature mixture of guilt and determination, admitted that his heart had been torn for too long, that he could not live a life built on divided loyalty, and that choosing to stay with Taylor when his soul still yearned for Brooke would be the greatest cruelty of all, not just to himself, but to her, because she deserved more than a man who woke up every morning trying to convince himself that his heart belonged fully to her when it did not. And as Taylor's sobs filled the mansion, Steffi and Thomas arrived, drawn by the sudden tension, their faces etched with disbelief as their father revealed the truth. He was leaving. He could no longer lead their mother on. He could no longer deny the pull that had always drawn him back to Brooke, no matter how much history or logic fought against it. And Steffi, fiercely protective of her mother, lashed out, accusing Ridge of once again choosing the Logan woman over the family that had always sacrificed for him, while Thomas, torn between his anger at Ridge and his own guilt for the manipulations that had once driven Ridge and Brooke apart, stood silent, unable to defend or condemn, simply watching as the foundation of their family crumbled once again. And Taylor, through her tears, pleaded with Ridge to reconsider, reminding him of the time she had been there for him when Brooke betrayed him, when their children needed a united front, when he himself had been lost and broken. But Ridge, his jaw tight and his eyes misty, said the most haunting thing of all, that sometimes love is not about who never left, but about who your heart never truly left behind. And with that he gathered his coat, brushed past his children, and left Taylor standing there in her own living room, her world spinning, her tears unending, her heart screaming at her to hate him, yet unable to stop loving him. And the aftermath was brutal. The Forresters split into factions, with Eric reluctantly supporting Ridge's decision, believing a man should follow his heart even if it hurt, while Steffi vowed to never forgive Brooke for once again destroying their family. And Taylor, in her office days later, stared at her reflection in the mirror, her mascara smudged from nights of sleeplessness, wondering how a woman as strong, as intelligent, as resilient as her could still be the casualty of Ridge's indecision. And as the whispers of his 5 shocking words echoed through the fashion empire, fans and family alike questioned whether this time it was truly the end, whether Ridge would finally commit to Brooke once and for all, or whether the cycle of heartbreak would spin again, drawing Taylor back into his arms when destiny twisted once more. But one thing was certain. Those words marked the end of an era, the tearing of a bond that had been stitched and re-stitched too many times, leaving scars that even time might never fully heal. And as the sun set over Los Angeles, Taylor Hayes, alone in her home, whispered to herself that she would rise again, even if Ridge Forrester had just walked out, leaving her shattered in the ruins of a love story that never learned how to last. Taylor Hayes sat in the dim glow of her office lamp long after Ridge's departure, her fingers tracing the rim of her untouched cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago, her mind spiraling as if trapped in a vortex of every memory, every whispered promise, every kiss that had once convinced her she was finally the one, that their family was finally whole. And as the clock ticked past midnight, her tears had dried, but her heart still bled, and it was in that haunting stillness that Steffi barged in, her eyes red and wild from crying, declaring that this time it had gone too far, that she would not allow Brooke Logan to win again, because to Steffi, this was not just about love. This was about betrayal, about the woman who had haunted her parents' marriage like a phantom for decades, stealing moments, sowing doubt, playing victim, and now, once again, standing at the finish line while Taylor lay crumpled in the dirt of her own broken dreams, and Taylor tried to soothe her daughter to tell her that this was Ridge's decision, not Brooke's manipulation. But Steffi, fiery as ever, swore that she saw Brooke's hand in this, recalling how Brooke had invited Ridge to that private dinner in Rome, how she had sent him those subtle reminders of their past, while Taylor was focused on rebuilding their family's legacy at Forrester Creations, and Steffi, her voice trembling, vowed to confront Brooke, to make her pay, to expose her as the poison that kept infecting their family's happiness, while Taylor, weary and broken, begged her to stay out of it, to let her handle her own heartache. But Steffi could not, because to her, Ridge's betrayal was also a betrayal of Kelly and Hayes, of the family unit she had fought so hard to preserve. And as the days passed, the drama spilled into the boardroom, with Thomas struggling to keep peace while secretly resenting his father for making their mother relive this nightmare, because Thomas, despite his own dark history with deception, had truly believed that Ridge had changed, that he had chosen their mother out of genuine love and not as a bandage for his wounds. And now he found himself at war with his own instincts. Should he side with his mother and sister in their campaign against Brooke, or should he acknowledge that their father's heart was never truly free from Brooke's grip, even when he swore it was? And meanwhile, Brooke, caught between guilt and vindication, was shocked when Ridge showed up at her doorstep days after leaving Taylor, the rain once again streaking down the windows as it had so many times in their tortured past, his face worn from sleepless nights, telling her he needed to be honest, that he had hurt too many people by pretending, that he had tried to make a life with Taylor because it felt safe, because it felt right on paper, but his heart, his stubborn, foolish, relentless heart, still belonged to her, and Brooke, ever the queen of complicated forgiveness, felt the old ache rise again, the part of her that had always believed they were destined, that every detour, every betrayal, every heartbreak was just another bend in the road leading them back together. Yet she hesitated because she had sworn to herself she would not be his second choice again, that she would not be the woman he returned to simply because his other plan fell apart. And so she asked him, through tearful eyes, why now? Why after all the pain, after promising Taylor a future, after tearing their families apart? Why should she believe that this time he would stay? And Ridge, his voice thick with emotion, confessed that it wasn't about timing, it was about truth, that living a lie had become unbearable, that he couldn't keep watching Brooke from afar and pretending the ache in his chest was just nostalgia. And as their conversation stretched deep into the night, Taylor sat alone at home, clutching a framed photo of her children, whispering their names as though they were the only anchors keeping her from drifting into the abyss of despair and the next morning. The media caught wind of the scandal. Tabloids screaming about Ridge Forrester's shocking split. Paparazzi snapping photos of Taylor leaving her office with swollen eyes, of Brooke seen entering Ridge's car. And the public spectacle added another layer of humiliation to Taylor's pain, making her feel like the world was watching her unravel. And it was in that vulnerable moment that an unexpected figure entered her life. Nick Marone, an old flame, a man who had once loved her when Ridge was too blind to see her worth, reappeared in Los Angeles for a business deal, and upon seeing Taylor's anguish splashed across headlines, he reached out, offering her shoulder, a reminder that she had once been loved purely, without rivalry, without triangles, and though Taylor was hesitant, a small part of her felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in months, the possibility of being chosen without competition. And as this triangle morphed into a tangled web of past loves resurfacing, Steffi launched her plan to sabotage Brooke's reunion with Ridge, orchestrating a series of boardroom maneuvers to freeze Brooke out of Forrester Creations projects, while Thomas secretly met with Brooke, warning her of the storm his sister was about to unleash, confessing that though he was furious with his father, he refused to see the company destroyed over yet another romantic war. And in the midst of this chaos, Ridge found himself torn again, not between two women this time, but between the life he wanted with Brooke and the family he was once again losing piece by piece, because every choice he made seemed to fracture his bond with his children, who saw his return to Brooke as a betrayal not just of their mother, but of them, of the unity they had fought to rebuild. And Taylor, slowly regaining her composure, began to see this not just as heartbreak, but as liberation, as painful as it was, because for the first time in years, she was no longer waiting for Ridge to choose no longer living on the scraps of his attention. And with Nick's gentle encouragement and Steffi's fierce loyalty, she started to envision a future where she was whole without Ridge, where her happiness didn't hinge on his promises. And yet, every night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, those 5 words echoed in her mind. I can't do this anymore, taunting her, freeing her, wounding her, healing her all at once, because, in a strange way, they had forced her to confront the truth she had, buried beneath years of compromise, that loving Ridge Forrester had always come with a cost. And maybe, just maybe, this time the cost was too high to pay again. Days stretched into weeks, and yet the wound Ridge Forrester inflicted with those 5 devastating words, I can't do this anymore, remained raw, a scar forming over Taylor Hayes' heart even as the bleeding underneath refused to stop, and the Forrester mansion, once filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and carefully curated celebrations of unity, now echoed with whispered arguments, slammed doors, and the quiet devastation of a family splintered by old patterns repeating themselves in the most public, humiliating way, because every member of the clan had an opinion, every faction had its own version of the truth, and no one could fully agree on who was to blame, whether Ridge was the villain for walking out, or Brooke the eternal siren who pulled him back, or Taylor herself for believing, once again, that her love could rewrite destiny. And while Taylor tried to keep her head high for her children, attending hospital rounds, seeing patients, presenting herself as the calm, collected psychiatrist who always had the right words for others, behind closed doors she was a woman unraveling, sitting alone with old journals and therapy notes from years past, tracing the same cycle that had plagued her since her youth, a cycle of waiting for Ridge, fighting for Ridge, losing Ridge, and then watching him return only to lose him again. And the pattern had become a prison of her own making, one she was finally beginning to see clearly for the first time as her daughter Steffi stormed through the family estate, vowing that Brooke Logan would regret every smile, every champagne toast, every sly look she cast Ridge's way in Rome, because Steffi had taken it personally this time, no longer just a daughter protecting her mother, but a woman at war with the idea that her family's legacy would always bend to Brooke's whims, and she began to call secret meetings with her grandfather Eric and with Carter Walton, proposing that they strategically push Brooke out of the spotlight at Forrester Creations by highlighting new faces, new campaigns, new lines that had nothing to do with the Logan matriarch, while Thomas, ever the reluctant peacemaker in this round of the eternal war, quietly confided in his father that Steffi's anger was reaching a dangerous level, the kind that once drove him to dark places of manipulation and obsession, and warned Ridge that if he truly intended to reunite with Brooke, he would have to stand firm or risk his family tearing itself apart. But Ridge, torn as always, struggled to find his footing, because his heart told him one thing and his guilt told him another. And when Brooke welcomed him into her home with that familiar mixture of warmth and wariness, he felt a pull he could not deny, spending more nights by her side, remembering the years they had built together, the children they raised, the memories that had never really faded, even when he tried to paint over them with new vows, new rings, new promises to Taylor, and the world began to notice. The press labeled it the revival of Bridge, a romance that never truly died, while tabloids mocked Taylor as always the bridesmaid woman of Los Angeles. And though she pretended not to care, each headline was another stone on the pile of humiliation she carried. Until one evening, as the ocean breeze swept through her open balcony doors, a knock came and there stood Nick Marone, holding a bottle of wine and a hesitant smile, reminding her of a time when love had been easy, when a man had loved her without needing to be rescued from another's arms first. And they talked deep into the night about mistakes and second chances, and for the first time in a long while, Taylor laughed. A real laugh, soft and unguarded. And it terrified her because it made her realize how long she had been holding her breath, waiting for Ridge to be her oxygen. While across town, Brooke found herself under attack, not just from Steffi, but from a wave of Forrester insiders who believed her reunion with Ridge would destabilize the company yet again. And Bill Spencer, always one to insert himself into Logan drama when it suited his agenda, appeared at her door offering support, not entirely unselfishly, whispering that Ridge would always hurt her, that she deserved a man who would fight for her without hesitation, his blue eyes glinting with both sincerity and calculation. And Brooke, though flattered, held firm. This wasn't about Bill. This wasn't about any man's validation. This was about a love that had been written and rewritten across decades of betrayal and forgiveness, and she wanted, for once, to see it through without interference, even as the world around her schemed. And meanwhile, Steffi launched a daring public statement during a fashion preview, hinting at toxic distractions in the company and making veiled references to Logan influence being a destabilizing force, causing the press to erupt with speculation, forcing Ridge to confront her. In his office, his voice rising as he demanded she stop waging war in public. But Steffi, her arms crossed and eyes blazing, shot back that she was fighting for her family, that he might have given up on their mother, but she never would, and that he would regret making an enemy of his own daughter if he continued down this path. And that night, Taylor received a text from Ridge asking to meet. And for a brief moment her heart leapt before she crushed the hope beneath her heel, meeting him not as the woman begging to be chosen, but as the mother of his children demanding respect. And she told him, with a newfound steel in her voice, that while he might have broken her heart, he would not break her spirit again, that she would rebuild, that she would stop waiting for him to define her worth. And though Ridge looked as though he wanted to apologize, to explain, perhaps even to confess that he still loved her in his own complicated way, she stopped him with a raised hand, saying the most powerful words she had uttered in years. "You may have ended us, Ridge, but you won't end me." And with that, she walked away, leaving him alone for once in the ruins he had created. And as Los Angeles hummed with gossip and the Forrester dynasty recalibrated itself yet again, one thing became increasingly clear. This was no longer just about Ridge choosing between two women. This was about a legacy at war with its own history, a family trapped in a loop of desire and destruction, and a woman named Taylor Hayes who, for the first time in decades, was starting to see the possibility of a life beyond the man who had defined her story for far too long.